Hi, this is Dr. Randy Hurst. I am doing this Wired Together Fundamentals video on anxiety, kind of focusing specifically on anxiety. So, the person who is going to benefit from this is the person where anxiety, foreboding, stress, just uncertainty, panic issues have developed into a problem. Or particular kinds of anxiety. I mean, a fear reaction to something specific like closed places or snakes, or there's one of the anxieties. It's called agoraphobia, and they refer to it as the fear of open places. But in a lot of ways, it's really, let's call it phobophobia. It's the fear of becoming afraid and in avoiding situations where you might become afraid. So this video focuses on how this happens, on how the brain works to set up for this to happen, and how a good thing like self-protection, because anxiety is about threat. It's about protecting oneself, can end up resulting in the unintended consequences. And the key to this is the term unintended, is how this can end up causing huge problems sometimes in people's lives, where they might avoid doing things. I had one fellow who he could go to work and come home, but he avoided more and more and more things, to the point that he wouldn't go outside with his kids and play. They didn't go places. He didn't go to the store. His wife did anything that involved getting things. It started with panic and overwhelmed to the point that it really did become this agoraphobia, except for the one place that he felt capable, which happened to be work. But in other cases, it can affect somebody to the point that they can't go to work either. It can affect marriages, families, in huge ways. Now, the key here, the brain reacts in self-protective ways faster than we can think. When there's a clear, immediate, real threat, we have what is referred to as this fight or flight reaction. The heart pumps, the blood pressure goes up, the blood kind of sucks into the middle of the body until a decision is made. Do I fight? And then it goes to the upper body where, the extra blood, adrenaline, all that is pumping to fight. Or if the decision is made to run, to flee, it's just pumping to go to the legs. And one of the things that happens is we narrow in on the threat, which means that we don't see all the other possibilities. We're just reacting to the emotion. And the very deep part of the brain is doing this. A part of the brain that reacts so quickly that we can be reacting to something before we've seen it, which sounds weird. But if you have had something happen in the past that triggers that old memory, or it's not even a memory at that point, it just triggers the system to jump into the fight or flight reaction, that can be happening before you've really formed what it is that triggered it. Weird. There can be odd things. We seem for some reason to react to spiders. Well, I've had a spider bite, and I can tell you, I'm glad that we react. You react to a certain little look. Growing up in Montana, being out in the hills, I didn't see rattlesnakes hardly ever, but there's certain what would you call it? A stick that looks a certain way can trigger to where you pull back and check. You want that reaction to happen very quickly. The good news is that often we react when we didn't need to, but we don't know that because it's happening before we've had time to think. And so when you've had time to think and go, oh, know that that's there to save your life. It's there to protect you. It just isn't always needed. If we trust our gut in situations, for example, hiking. My aunt, I've done this somewhere else, so you might have heard this, but she was getting older. She lived in these apartments. She went down this hill, across the highway. There's a grocery store, and she got down there. She looked both ways. She started across, and horn just blasting, almost hit her, and it just scared the heck out of her. She never went to the grocery store again. I mean, she did. She got a ride. Her daughter lived nearby, and so that's how she got to the groceries. But no walking down anymore. But a similar thing happened just on the walk on her side of the road. At some point, a car came up around a corner real fast, kind of bumped up near the curb where she was walking. Again, and she didn't. She stopped going for walks. Your life can become smaller and smaller if you, in her case, trusted her gut too much. She stopped going to the store. She stopped walking. She even stopped going outside and playing or doing stuff in her flower garden that she loved to do, because she started to worry about the chemicals that were being used on the lawn in her apartment complex. You know, trusting your gut can start to run you. Withdrawing does seem to make sense if it's self-protection, but what if what we're also doing is rewarding the fear? And that's a key. If you realize you're doing things to avoid anxiety or fear, or whenever you get nervous, you pull back, you avoid that situation, you avoid those people, you can find that you feel better. Well, that's a reward for having that reaction, that gut reaction, take over. You haven't taken the time to stop, think, well, what's going on? What's the context? Is it really a good thing to avoid this situation? Is it a good thing to avoid all situations? Rewarding that anxiety means that those brain cells that get into the pattern of avoiding, get into the pattern of feeling the relief, the reward of avoiding, start wiring together. Because if you do this in a pattern, if you do it consistently, the fire together, wire together, that I've talked about in another video, starts getting stronger. The pattern gets more automatic. It becomes what feels like who you are, and take over your life. For most people, this will take years. Although I've had some situations where it happens very quickly. A fellow who was in a grocery store line, and just the thought crossed his mind: how do I know who touched the money, the change they're going to give me? What if? And had a number of scenarios running through his mind about what he might be getting exposed to. What if he was applying for a job? What if he got money that had drugs on it and somehow that could be detected? It kind of took over. Now, and he described himself as really not being particularly anxious in his life before that. But boy, at that time in his life, whatever was going on around them, it just grabbed hold of him. A fellow who looked over his shoulder, and the way the setting sun and the clouds looked, it looked like a mushroom cloud, and the thing that just hit him, just boom, was a nuclear explosion. And he actually was able to look and go, that isn't what it is, just clouds. But just that boom fear reaction. Just nailed him, and he started reacting to other things. He started having thoughts of something horrible happening, and it started taking over. Luckily, in both cases, they came in fairly quickly, but this is a thing where it came on quick. Oh, another, give you an example, is a person in a car wreck. And this one makes sense that it could get to you later when you're in a car. But the things that then are, again, make sense in a way is what happens if you're driving and you stop at a stoplight, but you find that the horns are all blasting around you because it was never red. A car wreck at an intersection and in the months before. And so that quick self-protective brain kicked in, and the person didn't have time to stop and think, didn't recognize that, oh, that sort of thing can happen, so I have to really pay attention to what I'm doing and not let myself go on autopilot. Because, as you know, it's easy to go on autopilot when we drive. So, it's important anyway, but for somebody that has had an anxiety thing, it becomes more important. Again, I want to go back. We never intend to have these things get out of control. But it can happen unless we really pay attention to, wait a minute, what's going on? Why am I getting to be anxious in more situations when others say I don't need to be, or even I know I don't need to be, but I am. And it's that fire together, wire together, and do we trust that our gut, that gut reaction when we don't need to? I'm going to sneeze. In order to change, we need to really develop new wiring instead of stay with that old wiring that has started to trust and reward anxiety. Learning how to step back, learning how to do kind of the right thing, which often, when it comes to anxiety, means don't do the avoidance. But stop and think, because you have to decide, is this a place where avoidance is desirable, is better? Or is this one of those places where, no, I really should push myself through? One of the things that I had seen a training a few years ago, that being exposed to the things that we're afraid of, this has to do with veterans and PTSD, being exposed to the things that are overwhelming was the best thing for people. At the same time, only 25% of people could tolerate the level of agitation that came with being exposed to the things that trigger all of their intrusions, all of their trauma. And so I urge people to push themselves through small things first. Learn to have faith that you can get through something. Learn to have faith that you can get through something that's back here, but not all the way full-blown, overwhelming. And if you can move in steps towards the full-blown anxiety. We don't always know what it is, especially anxiety. Anxiety is about general. And so trying to get yourself through those things that you avoid with small things first. Again, if it becomes too much, get help. Introduction, there'll be more. Hope you enjoyed. Hope it helps.